Time is now 3:30, so I'll call to order the City of Norwood Planning Commission. Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Present.
Mayor Schneider, Mrs. Sickinger,
Present.
Mr. Hockney,
Present.
Mr. Sewer.
Present.
First move to approve the minutes of the August 3rd meeting. Do I have a second to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion, we approve the minutes from the August 3rd meeting.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Who made the second, please?
I made the motion and Mr.
Okay.
Sewer made
Oh,
the
I'll
second.
second.
Thank you. Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to item C on our agenda, the continued review of Chase Davis Bowling Green Capital LLC Andover Management. Group has made an application for a minor planned unit development for the establishment of a state-licensed medical marijuana dispensary within an approximately 3,640 square foot single-story commercial retail building situated at 4029 and 4033 Smith Road. Mr. Skelly, if you'd please give us an update.
Sure. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hello, applicant, and also members of the public. So since we had at our last meeting on August 3rd, which was the conclusion of the hearing, essentially I was directed by the Planning Commission to prepare possible conditions of approval for this application. With regards to being tasked with that, I had discussions initially with the applicant, discussions with Clint Zimmerman, our Director for Public Works, also with our engineer of record. I had circulated earlier drafts to the Planning Commission for review, and I did that in a sense both cooperating with the applicant to accept and look at their proposed conditions in addition to what I solicited from the Planning Commission, what I thought was consistent with the zoning ordinance, and comments, as I mentioned, from Clint Zimmerman and also from the engineers dealing with transportation, etc. To that effect, I had prepared a list of around 20 or so conditions which were indicated in both documents prepared on August 22nd and 25th, which were circulated. The latter one definitely being circulated to the applicant and also for council for the Cornerstone property. At this point, in the last, I would say, probably 10 days, there has been further discussion on a few of the items, and we had a couple further edits which are now in front of you as per email that went out yesterday for conditions dated August 31st. And we also have a clean version, I don't know if it has been distributed also from our applicant. I have a copy. I believe Richard Tranter has additional copies to look at. But at this point, in summary, I'm satisfied with what has occurred. I think we've done a fairly complete outreach in terms of trying to nail down the concerns and the issues relevant to this particular proposed minor PUD. And those items that had some additional need for editing were done, and the applicant was in full agreement for those changes.
Okay. Mr. Tranter, do you have additional copies of that document? Yes. If you would please provide those to Mr. Skelly.
Sure. For the record, my name is Richard Tranter, attorney with Dinsmore Scholl on behalf of the applicant. Address 255 East 5th Street, Cincinnati, Ohio. Mike. Make sure the mayor gets one. I think I'm 4. I'm 1 short.
Okay.
There's not one for the record.
And Mike, I'll give you mine when I get done here.
Yeah, I think I actually have two, so we're good.
Okay, great. Very briefly, I just wanted to first thank Mr. Skelly for his attention to this matter. And we had a number of discussions, and I appreciated his fairness on a couple of the edits that I had requested. However, for the benefit of Norwood, we did incorporate substantially your conditions. And so the version you're looking at, that is an 8/31 draft. It's a clean draft so that if you are so disposed, you could attach it to your resolution. I just had two nit comments because I didn't have the facts on the two omits. There's two blanks. I just wanted to cover those if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please do.
Okay. On 3B, there's a blank. It says revised. The insert should be revised 7/6/22, July 6, 22, containing one sheet, not two sheets. So it should read, Gail A. Fraser, registered landscape architect, dated 6/16/22, revised 7/6/22, containing one sheet. Then the other is under C, where it says Oliver Architecture, dated 6/15/22, as revised on. There was no revision, so that's just an NA, if you would insert NA there. And just out of an abundance of caution, because this was a request from the law department, in 4, and I want to make sure it's on the record because there's a draft reference on the agenda. In 4, after you see that 1,000 feet, it had said may, and it now says shall, and that was at the direction of the law department. We had no problem with that. And the only reason I bring it out is that on the agenda for the public hearing, it says under A, it refers to the draft dated 8/22. That should actually be dated 8/31. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. And we have our team here, but for our architect who couldn't make it down, if there's any further questions. Otherwise, I respectfully request if you could approve the resolution with the conditions as handed out and as amended. Thank you.
Mr. Tranger. Okay. Any discussion from the commissioners on these items and these conditions for approval? We'd like to go there.
No, if I could just have a clarification from Mike, because I just don't, I'm not familiar with item 6D. Not that I'm against it or for it. What is a yellow ball trap?
6D.
I just don't know. Do you see it, Mike?
No.
I'm sorry, under
Last sentence.
the last sentence, it says, configured to eliminate the potential of a yellow ball trap
Got
for
it, I see it.
southbound left-turning vehicles. If you don't know, it's not a big deal.
No, the only thing, these were pulled up verbatim, at least from the
Finders.
traffic engineer, so I believe we have a hand up, so we have a professional can answer that.
I can give a large dissertation on it.
No, I'd like a very short definition.
Ed Williams with TEC Engineering, 7288 Central Park Boulevard, Mason, Ohio, 45040. It's Park with an E. So yellow ball trap is working with JMA as the traffic engineer. The yellow ball trap is basically if you have a yellow arrow, if you had a yellow arrow at the end of a cycle, so it's green ball and then a yellow arrow comes up. If that came up immediately, the people turning left on the other side of you don't realize that you have a green arrow, and they may turn left on red, but you don't have red, and so the direction opposite them has a green, and they don't know it. And it's very difficult. That's as best as I can explain. It's hard to unless you see it. And so it is where you have a permissive protected left. The one side has a permissive or protected left on the back end of the cycle. So let's say northbound, it gets an arrow, while northbound through is still going. Southbound left thinks that they're clearing the intersection on a red, but in fact they're turning into someone who has green. So that's a yellow ball trap.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's why a lot of signals will go to the side street before they come back to the main street, so to prevent that yellow ball trap, or you have a protected left,
Thank you.
so you don't have that issue.
I do appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Ed, could you stay up?
Yeah.
Can we get a question for him?
Yes.
Mine, I look at all of these, or I look at the A, B, C, and D. And B, it says relocate the pavement stop bar on the southbound approach to Smith. What's the decision there? I mean, it's a very wide, big intersection already. You're pulling the stop bar back further. What's the
So
reasoning for that?
there's two reasons. One is where that driveway is going to come in, it's going to be very close to that stop bar. And the applicant may want to add to this, but that stop bar is going to be very close to the intersection if it's not moved. The second is to provide a crossing across the street. That crosswalk, if you look on the Cornerstone side, the curb ramp is pretty far up, and you could angle it, but you'd still have to pull that southbound stop bar back.
Okay.
And I would guess once they get into design of the signal, that signal pole may have to be relocated, and that'll pull back some of that anyway. So.
That was really the only
Okay.
real one that I have for you.
Thank you.
I mean, I knew what the yellow trap ball was.
I'm sorry, Vic.
No, I didn't.
It is a very rare thing to see because people design things correctly, but it is a scary situation to watch. So.
Okay.
Any additional items for discussion from any of the commissioners?
I feel like I'm the only one that ever asks questions. This is my last question.
They're always good questions.
The escrow that's being requested by the city, it's strictly for the public improvements within the right-of-way, that's for the 80,000?
Correct. So
Okay. It's just,
Okay. If there's no additional questions, we'll take an opportunity to allow folks who have come here to speak today to do that. I'd like to ask it, I believe we need to swear folks in.
And note that the mayor came in.
Yes. If you would please note that Mayor Schreiner is now present.
Is there's anyone here who wishes to speak for this, whether for or against? If you please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
I'd like to offer an opportunity for anybody wishing to speak against the acceptance to come forward.
For the record, again, Steve Gooden, representing Matrix Holdings, the Cornerstone Property Operating Group. We just wanted to note our continuing objection to the approval on the grounds that we've set forth before. I don't want to waste this body's time any further. I think we've laid out as well as we can our general objections, whether they be pedestrian safety, traffic issues, and certainly changing the nature and the character of the area due to the kind of business, and lastly, the precedental value that this might set forward. So we appreciate you listening to us, and we would rest on the previous arguments that we have put forward and on the letter that we wrote back in July when this matter was first before this body.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else wishing to speak opposed?
Benjamin Town, 2217 Washington Avenue. Grew up in Norwood, been here my whole life. I know in the past, Norwood's gotten a bad reputation that it doesn't deserve sometimes. What I'm worried about here is Norwood becoming the place to come and get your drugs. I know legally, I don't know anything about that. You know, whatever this body can do, the plan for Norwood, from a citizen's perspective, I would hope that our plan is not come get your drugs from Norwood in Norwood. So I just wanted to come raise the concerns from that perspective, which I haven't really heard talked about. I watch on YouTube and stuff. But so that's it, just short and sweet. I hope Norwood's not the place where you come and get your drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else who wishes to speak opposed? Seeing none, I'll ask if anybody wants to speak in favor of the development. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Any additional discussion from the commissioners? Seeing none, I'll ask if there are any motions to approve or deny. If there are motions to approve with conditions, I would encourage you to look at our text, which would help you formulate that motion.
Go ahead, if you want to ask a question or a motion, whatever.
Well, I'm just looking at what's written here. I've read this the other day. I will make the motion. The motion would be to approve the establishment of a state-licensed medical marijuana dispensary within an approximate 3,640 feet squared, single-story commercial retail building situated at 4029 through 4033 Smith Road, subject to those City of Norwood conditions listed in comparison of draft conditions of approval for 4029, 4033 Smith Road, medical marijuana dispensary, minor PUD application dated 8/22 of 2022.
Sir.
That should be the 831, which is the most recent one.
Well, I amend my motion to state the date of 8/31/2022. Section B needs to be read also.
Yes.
Also, within that motion, I'd like to say, as per section 1155.22, the applicant shall cause the terms and conditions of the approval to be recorded in a recordable instrument approved as to form by the city law director. The recordable instrument shall recite that the conditions of the planned unit development are covenants that run with the land and are enforceable by the city or by neighboring property owners. That is the motion that I would like to make.
Do I have a second?
I would like to second that motion.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
All in favor? The motion passes.
No, would you allow me to ask Mike a question about the execution of this document, if in fact council endorses it?
Yes.
The minor PUD is unique from the standpoint that there will be changes. And the way it's described, at least the way I read it, the way it's written, the condition is that the applicant has agreed to is the decisions of a definition of a minor modification will be either by the building department and/or will come in front of this group. Is that
Correct. So item 4 provides some, for lack of a better word, wiggle room as to the tolerances.
and a PUD by definition has wiggle room? I get
Yeah.
it.
And Dan Bly, the chief building official, will make the initial determination, and if necessary, it could come back to this body
Okay.
for,
But
review.
typically, it would be handled at Dan Bly's level Correct. So that they're not having to come back monthly to this group. That's really my point of this, because this is a minor PUD, and there's gray areas, there always is.
Correct, and we experienced that with regards to even the prior month with regards to going to the Board of Zoning Appeals, so.
But being that this is a pretty tight set of drawings already at this level, I think that this should be minor. I can't see major issues coming out of this, but that's your intent right now, that it would be handled at Dan Bly level. Most issues, and some may have to come here, but few. Okay.
Mr. Seward, just a point of clarification. When you stated earlier that this would then go to council, it does not go to council after this.
I apologize for that. That's correct.
Just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Moving on to item D, old business. Item D1, ongoing zoning ordinance amendment review. Mike, I believe we have distributed a zoning ordinance text amendment.
Correct, so you should have in your package a draft ordinance dated August 19th, 22. And essentially, this 6-page document brings in the pending discussion items that we've had over the last few months. For example, on page 2, section 9, it introduces the option for the use of porous pavement. So that will be now included in this pending draft. We have as well with regards to, again, fairly detailed standards that would apply to that. It also included a recent one, and we did receive some further correspondence to that effect yesterday from Mr. Cameron Kelly at 43434 Floral Avenue. Is the email distributed to the members, or?
It was on their desk.
Okay, so if you guys have copies, you can read for yourself in terms of what his request was. That was something that was discussed and is included also in this draft document on page 3, section 12, and similar to the discussions we had earlier with regards to the treatment of fences within the secondary side yard for corner lots. That's also, policies for the inclusion of that, where if it fits fairly narrow designed criteria, that can be handled at the staff level without having to come to the, BZA or any kind of further, red tape of the process. In addition to that, there was, and again, it starts off initially through discussions I've had with Mark Reeves, and this is something which is new to you folks, is with regards to the merits for including sorority and fraternity houses within our zoning ordinance. So at this point, we do not have any of those sort of dwelling units, which is a common arrangement that would be owned by Xavier. So it's one of those things where it was believed that if we don't necessarily need it or have it, why isn't it in the zoning ordinance? So Mark brought up that request. I included it, at least for discussion purposes, in this ordinance. And we can talk of that, At this point, that's really the major items included. Now, one thing, it was more house cleaning. On page 4 of 6, item section 14, this relates to a zoning ordinance amendment that occurred in 2014 for properties on the southeast corner of Lexington Montgomery Avenue, which were not included in the actual zoning ordinance. So what I decided to do is include that right now, because there were certain kind of unique criteria that were created that was not codified within our zoning ordinance. So I figured it's worthwhile doing that with regards to this draft.
Is this that long strip of property along Lexington then?
Correct.
The old CX?
Correct.
CSX. Loading this, okay.
So that section 14, Mike, is just implementing an ordinance that was already passed?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not a change.
No.
Thank you. Okay.
So at least for the intent of this meeting, this is now the first time you've seen this draft. What I'd like you to do is kind of, look at it. I went through the highlight of key points that it brings about. And obviously some might take a little bit more discussion, obviously, potentially with the sorority homes that could, take some time. Otherwise, I think quite a few of these things hopefully won't take too long, because I know, for example, we had fairly decent and lengthy discussions about porous paving. We also had a presentation by Dana Bull with regards to the merits for this. So,
But there does, sorry, question two. There is discussion reading Mr. Kelly's input from the email that he sent. There is more discussion that needs to be had on the air conditioning condensers and restrictions, and verifying that even the last part of his is, keep the current side yard and rear yard option setbacks without changing them. Or have we, I look at this and say, have we changed? Did we change that?
I don't think we have. I think what happened maybe in an earlier version that him and I were working through via email, I might have misspelled or mistyped something like that, so that could have led to that confusion. So what I will do is go, and again, I haven't done it in preparation for today's meeting right now, gone through in detail to make sure everything is completely clean.
Of his recent email dated September 6th?
Correct.
Okay. Yes, that definitely needs to be done.
But again, in theory, everything he suggested, all the discussions I had, I think it's a good suggestion. Definitely, he's the expert because he deals with these on a daily basis. And I think it'll definitely save some time and frustration for residents.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Skelly? Mike, if you would briefly talk about Section 13. That's dealing with the minor planned unit development.
Sorry, give me a second. So item 13 was something that was actually identified, and we mentioned just with regards to the tail end of the last discussion. So there potentially was confusion when an applicant would submit a minor PUD, whether that application also had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for consideration. How it's currently written, essentially one could read it that the Planning Commission would take the application and review it against the criteria of a conditional use and be done with that. Others could look at that interpretation saying, if that's the case, then it has to also appear at the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is the appropriate body to consider conditional uses. So essentially, we went through that deliberation, and one of the board members mentioned, hey, if this is the case, then being aware that we're working on this amendment, just to clean it up. So that was the intention for item, essentially, was to include that. So it would provide for at least more definitive reasoning that, again, a minor PUD just is handled by the planning commission. It doesn't have to go to council for a subsequent hearing, et cetera. So all deliberations would occur by the planning commission meeting, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
No,
sorry.
on that subject, just for my own sake, and I did not, where does it define, is it in the definitions, minor PUD?
Correct. So,
Okay, there is a definition in the minor?
correct, in chapter 1155.
Okay. And that is identified by the applicant or by the building commissioner?
Well, it's identified in the zoning ordinance, so if an applicant meets thresholds, and again, it's pretty much under 2.5.
So it's got to be identified as a PUD on the map, zoning map, and then it's got to meet criteria to define whether or not it's minor or major.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Pardon me, but of that same section, in A, Mike has pulled the 20th of the month as a deadline, which is what is specifically called out for the Board of Zoning Appeals. If you use the 20th of the month for a planning commission meeting, that doesn't give me enough time to process your paperwork and get it all notified. If you want to do it 20 days prior to the meeting, that would give me time.
What would be a good date for us to put in?
A date?
I want to say the 14th of each month. You know, that first meeting changes a little bit month to month.
So it would be sometime in the week of the first week of the month for the next meeting, if we stay in line with the BZA
Okay.
timeline. The BZA timeline gives me 4 weeks to process things. That gives me time to get the letters together, put the public notice in 10 days prior, kind of thing.
We say the 7th.
That'd be fine. Thank you. It was a good effort.
So demanding.
Okay. Looking on page 5, Mike, it would appear that section 15, is that where we would place section on row homes and townhouses?
Correct, yeah, it's just a placeholder, so.
Okay. I would say with that section filled in, giving us an opportunity to digest the rest of what's here and provide comments back to Mike in the interim between this meeting and the next. I think that would leave us just with the townhomes to look at and give us something to approve at that meeting to send to council. Does that seem like a reasonable timeline?
Yes?
Okay. So, Mike, if you'll make that change from the 20th to the 7th, and then when you have the language that you think is appropriate for row homes and townhomes put together, if you'll send that to the commissioners for comment back to you.
Okay.
I think we'll be prepared to take some action at our October meeting.
So is this to replace the minor PUD language that's there?
For section 13?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
So the minor PUD language that's there asks, the confusion came when it said that the minor PUD shall be considered under the conditional use guidelines as the design standard guidelines, but I don't see where any of that is addressed in this, saying that Planning Commission would use certain guidelines. Do you understand?
Correct, yeah, so I think as you work your way down and then to item E, the commission shall rely upon those review criteria listed in section
Thank you.
11 and 17. So I think that's essentially by reference.
So that'll take out that part that caused the confusion.
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's a little bit more language, but it provides more certainty.
Thank you, sir.
Any additional discussion on item D1A, zoning ordinance text amendment? Seeing none? I believe in discussing that item, we also covered D1B, which is follow-up to Mike Skelly's memo dated 6/22 regarding row home townhomes and the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment. But any discussion on that item? Seeing none. Move on to item E, new business, discussion on mobile food vendor, food trucks and push carts. I would, taking a look at this, suggest that we table this. I understand there is some discussion on one of our council committees developing an ordinance on this, so we may be duplicating effort. Want to see what they put forward before we do any additional discussion on this item. But I'd also be willing to hear that we go ahead and discuss it now.
Redundant work is redundant work, and let them handle it.
Okay. Do I have a motion to table that item?
Second? Oh, you can't make, I'll make the first, yes.
Do I have a second?
Make a second.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
That item is tabled. Item F, Raymond Strecker request to address Planning Commission regarding a letter dated August 15th, 2022.
My name is Raymond Strecker, S-T-R-E-C-K-E-R. I live at 1757 Mills, M-I-L-L-S Avenue in West Norwood. Chairman Powers, Mayor Snyder, and members of the committee, thank you for letting me speak to you briefly today. I don't think this is a big deal on the global scheme of what goes on in Norwood, but it's something that's important to me. So I live right next door to the Vineyard Central Church, which is in the corner of Mills and Lincoln Avenue. And I'm an active member of that church. I'm fully involved with it. I've been an elder, I'm a trustee. If I could just give you a little map that, as I'm explaining what I'd like to do, it's a little easier to see if you have something to refer to.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the house that I live in, previously when the church was St. Elizabeth Catholic Church, the house I live in used to be the rectory. And behind it is the convent. So it was all one big, multiple parcels, but one owner of the archdiocese. But then it was sold and divided up. So as a result, the line between my house and the church, which runs from Mills all the way down to Lincoln, is almost next to my house. It is within a couple feet of my house. So it's the existing property line that's there. I've listed it at the top. So I can literally not, there's a sidewalk that goes from the front of my house to the back of my house. I cannot walk to the back that way without walking on church property rather than my own. So the concern was if the church changes hands in the future, we don't know what the future might bring, would someone buy it, move in, decide to put up a fence or do something that would make it so I couldn't fix my gutters, I couldn't paint my windows, just not have a reasonable access to my home. So I talked to the trustees about doing a transfer between adjoining owners that would allow me to buy an 8-foot wide strip of land that just gives me a little bit of elbow room for that property. And they were in favor of it. I'm a trustee, but obviously I'm not voting on that. I presented the information, but I'm not part of the decision, of course. And they were especially excited. And back in my yard, there are 5 beautiful 100-year-old oak trees, and I've made little drawings of those there. 2 of them are on the church property in this space. So if I were able to buy it, that those trees would then be on my property. And they were thrilled to know that if they became sick and needed to be taken down, that bill would come to me, not to the church. They said, great, let's do it. We also have a large backyard there where those trees are, and I share it with the community. We had church baptisms there 2 weeks ago. We had a pre-wedding party on a Friday evening where I said, sure, come and use that space. It's a beautiful space. It's shaded, nice. Azalea Montessori, they often have outdoor programs, and they come and use that space, and I'm happy to share it. So thinking of the openness of all that space is nice for me, nice for the community, nice for the church and the community, and we enjoy it. And there's times when, let's see, I already maintain the property, just as a volunteer. I cut the grass, I rake the leaves, I just take care of it. And there are times when, for maintenance work, that lifts have to be brought into that space. We had windows painted a couple years ago, and we're now fixing some more windows and having to paint those, and a lift will have to come into that space to go up and down. So the challenge is the church is zoned neighborhood business district, and my house is zoned R2. So my question to the committee is that would that require a buffer hedge fence between the business district and the residents, which I think is in section 1511. I don't know these things very well, but if that was required, it just wouldn't work because it would prevent lifts from being brought in to do maintenance. It would kind of destroy the community feel of sharing the space between the church and the community by running a fence or hedge on that 224-foot line. So before I have it surveyed and have the legal descriptions drawn up and all that sort of thing, I just was hoping that you might consider saying that you would be open to the idea of not requiring that, which would ruin the project. It just wouldn't work. I know don't expect you to rule on anything, but to just give an indication that that's in the realm of a reasonable thing to request. So if you're in a position to be open to that, I'll have the survey done, I'll have the descriptions written up, I'll send in, and I'm assuming from my discussions with Ms. Town that I would come back and apply to the Planning Commission map amendment. Is that because we're amending the maps, I guess, yes. So I would, have, and of course this would come from the church since they're the ones that they're selling the property. So the request would come from them. I'll pay all the fees, but they would submit that, request to you, and I would do the surveys and present it maybe next month if I can get it all done in time to submit.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Any questions, or were you allowed to ask questions? I don't know. I don't know how this works. My first time. So.
Should we ask? Mike, did you look at this?
No, I don't know anything about it.
Okay, the end. Looking at the chart, maybe I'm all wet on this. The neighborhood business district zone, new chart that we just submitted, approved single-family dwellings as an approved use. So I'm just kind of asking the question: why is this a problem?
I don't know if it's a problem. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But,
No. I'm just trying to figure out that it looks like we've got a chart that says, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it says land use types that are approved in an NBD is residential single-family dwellings.
Yeah.
Right? So if there's a transfer done here, it's an approved use.
I think that's probably correct. I would say, Mr. Strecker, we don't want to give you an official answer here right here as we sit, but what I'll do for you is I'll ask building department staff to take a look at this issue, and we'll get you an answer to that question in advance of our next planning commission.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because obviously I don't want to spend the money and then have it get shot down,
Certainly
or not,
understand that.
if there's an issue that way. But I'll be glad to, talk to anybody or do anything. Yes.
Sorry, when you say shot down, what precisely being shot?
If I were to do the transfer, that property is now mine, and because a change has been made to the property line, would you say, oh, that's Norwood Business District next to a residence, therefore you have to put up a hedge or a fence? There's a buffer and screening. It's like if CarX put a, business next to mine, we all would want a hedge or a fence between our properties.
So I guess your linchpin is that if it's going to cost you any additional landscaping, screening, whatever, that is your default thing.
No, it's not that
It's not the cost.
It's not the cost. It would ruin, it would eliminate access for like a lift to come in and do repairs.
Okay.
And it would divide up the property in a way that would just make the shared use between church and us and the community unworkable. So it's not a cost issue, it's a requirement. I mean, I'm hoping we can do this. No one will even know it's been done, of course, because I'm not building anything on it. It's just now gives me some elbow room that if I need to work, and some future person owns the building, I still have access to my
You
side
could put
of
a
the
slip
house.
and slide on your property.
I can put a slip and slide on my property, exactly. I got 8 grandkids, so yes, we do that.
How close did the archdiocese put that property line?
Well, see, it used to be, originally,
Right, I see that.
these 4, and then these plus the convent plus this was all archdiocese property. The
Correct.
parcels, of course, weren't changed, and that's why the line is right there, because it's 2 parcels of 50 by 112 feet. And for them, it didn't matter. And when it was sold back in 2004, this was surveyed, but that line was allowed to stay within reach of the building.
I assume you bought it after they,
Oh, yeah, that happened back in 95.
95, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite a long time before
Okay.
before I came along. Yeah.
Okay. Any
See-
further questions for Mr. Stricker? Mr.
So
Stricker?
I should hold off doing anything until I can connect with someone in the building department
Yes.
to help.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll ask them for some clarification on this issue, what would be needed out of planning commission.
Okay.
And hopefully that'll put us in a position to be a little bit more directional with you when we get to our October.
All right. Thank you so much for
Very
your
good.
time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Moving on to item G, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
We are officially adjourned at 4:18.
Oh, I already turned it on.